Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our information session today on the 2026 Paul P. Fidler Research Grant. It looks like we still have a few people coming in from the waiting room, so we'll give it about 30 more seconds before we dive into today's content. I will say on behalf of the National Resource Center, we're excited to see so many of you here and so many of you interested in this grant opportunity. We're also really excited to have a member of last year's winning team with us as well. You're going to hear from her a little bit later on about her experience with the application and how the grant has impacted and furthered her research. So hopefully you'll get a lot of great insights from Dr. Angie Miller when that time comes. All right, so it looks like we have everyone out of the waiting room, so I will go ahead and kick us off with today's information session. My name is Sean Cleary. I'm the Assistant Director for Resources and External Relations here at the National Resource Center. In today's webinar, I am primarily going to be monitoring the waiting room and also fielding anything that comes through in the chat. So if you have a question that you think of as we go along with today's presentation, feel free to drop it in the chat. I will do my best to answer that question, but if I don't have the answer, then we will definitely save your question for the end of the session and make sure that everyone leaves feeling confident about how to move forward with the application. Jared, if you want to switch us to the next slide, I will pass things over to you and Kevin for your introductions.
Great. Thank you so much, Sean, and thank you all for joining us today. It's really wonderful to see your interest in research in this area of the field and, of course, in pursuing this grant opportunity with us. I'm Jared Warshaw. I serve as our Assistant Director for Research and Grants, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Dr. Kevin Wenger, who's a research analyst, and he and I oversee and administer the Paul P. Fidler Research Grant. And again, we're happy to be here with y'all to be able to share information that we hope you'll find helpful as you're preparing materials to submit. So in terms of our agenda today, we don't want to spend a ton of time on it, but nevertheless, since you're here with us, we want to nevertheless share with you more about our context. We're at the National Resource Center for the first year experience and students in transition. And so I want to be able to introduce you to some of what we do and who we are. Of course, we'll talk some about the grant itself and the award package. And I'll turn things over later to my colleague, Dr. Winger. He'll talk to you about the application process and the timeline and review, as well as share some tips to consider to make sure that you've got the strongest, most competitive proposal. And new for this year, for this information session format that we're doing, we're so happy and thrilled to have with us Dr. Angie Miller, who's the leader of a team that won the grant last year. And she's here to be able to share with her the experience they've had over the past year in terms of the work they've been able to do and achieve. And maybe she'll have some good tips and insights to share as well, again, as you're preparing your materials for us. So as I mentioned, we're part of the National Resource Center, also known as the NRC, and we're housed in the Division of Student Affairs and Academic Support at the University of South Carolina. And of course, we're committed to advancing research in the area of student transitions. But more broadly, our mission is to serve educational professionals by supporting and advancing efforts that improve student transitions into and through higher education. And as a center, we do have core commitments, which you could see up on the screen and you can read more about as well on our website. This is our team, again, just to give you a sense of the broader context of who your funder might be. We're led by our executive director, Dr. Kate Lehman, and we also have a pretty robust staff that advances work in a variety of different areas and domains, including student transfer. We have Sean and his team who are very helpful in managing the publications we have and do through our journal on the first year experience and students in transition, as well as in another journal largely geared for practitioners called Insights. And he and his team too, they're the ones who are responsible for a lot of the marketing and promotional cycles we'll do, especially when we announce the winner of the grant, and also aim to highlight 3 honorable mentions. And so something that we'll thread through our talk with you today is not just the opportunity to receive funding to advance the research, but also being able to win this award it puts you into the national spotlight where we want to share and elevate your work to make it as visible as possible, throughout our network and our audience. And again, Sean and his team are very instrumental in being able to do that. We also have the research and grants work that we do. So clearly, we administer grants, but we also do research ourselves. We pursue grants and whatnot. And then we have a team that focuses here on conferences and continuing education. And as you'll hear about in just a moment or so, part of the award package for this grant includes the opportunity to present at one of the conferences we host, our national conference on students in transition. But you may have heard of us perhaps before because of other conferences and work that we do around the first year experience. And starting next June 2027, we're going to launch a new conference that's focused around transfer students and initiatives in higher education. So moving into the Paul P. Fidler Research Grant, the grant itself is named after a former colleague of ours at the University of South Carolina. And while there is some information here about Dr. Fidler and who he was and what he did and achieved here, I think the big takeaway is that the aim and scope of this award is to advance and disseminate new knowledge that would improve student transitions largely beyond the first year. And so while again, part of the work of our center focuses on the first year experience, I would say this award is more focused around student transitions beyond the first year. And again, that emanates from kind of the spirit and kind of founding of the award. And so the grant is open to faculty, staff, or students who are doing research on college student transitions. Last year, we had gotten the question from a researcher in the field who wasn't affiliated at a college or university, but was still a researcher or analyst. And a person like that would certainly still be eligible too. And as you'll hear again later, in our session together, we do fund teams. And so it doesn't have to be a sole investigator or some kind of solo project as well. And even research teams could have members at different types of institutions, not just a college or university. We at the center have worked diligently to try to bring more clarity to what we mean by students in transition, because it could mean a lot of different things. And so what you'll see here on the screen too are the ways that we think about and define student transitions, thinking about them as key inflection points that would include shifts in academic direction, institutional movement, advancement to graduate or professional education, so on and so forth. Another common question that we'll get from potential applicants is whether or not their work has to directly align with ways that we have tried to define students in transition. And so, again, really the general goal is to fund and support work focused on student transitions beyond the first year experience. There is openness and latitude for you to be able to pitch why we should think about, or define transitions in the way that you want to. And so if you feel like you have a project that kind of fits within transition beyond the first year, but you're not entirely sure if it precisely meets one of the bullet points on the screen, it is still fair game for you to be able to continue to advance and develop that work. But you'd want to think about how you could be very explicit in how it helps us think about what it means, student in transitions, in a new or different light. As a quick snapshot in terms of the award package, so to be able to win the Fidler Grant, it includes a $10,000 award that would go to directly fund the research and investigators. It would include as well priority consideration for article publication in the Journal of the First Year Experience and Students in Transition. It includes as well lots of publicity and promotion, especially through social media, that we have in-house support to facilitate. And it would also include being announced as the winner at our Students in Transition conference, which is held virtually in the fall. And it would include the opportunity a year later to be able to present at that conference on the findings that come from this grant-funded work. And so it's not just the opportunity um, to win resources to support research, but it includes other kind of key benefits as well that may be attractive and helpful to you all in the work that you're doing. And something that we're hoping to continue this year is to also identify, recognize, and celebrate up to 3 finalists or honorable mentions. And they too would receive priority consideration for participating and presenting at our national conference on students in transition. Um, and they also would be part of kind of the promotional work that we would do to be able to give more visibility and to elevate a lot of the good work that's taking place, but that is just hard for us to be able to fund all of the different projects at the same time. So now I'll turn things over to my colleague, Dr. Winger. He'll walk you through the application process, and we'll just keep things moving from there.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be with you today to talk through the application process. So let's go ahead and jump in. So first, a little bit about the application and some background there. I think one of the most important things to know is the application deadline is Monday, July 13th at 11:59 p.m. There is a 3-step process sort of involved in this. So the first step is going to be review all submission requirements. We'll talk through those kind of briefly today, but they are also more detailed and spelled out on the website. And then there is an application to download, and you're able to fill this out and complete it in your own time. This is a PDF form that you can fill all the different fields out. Um, Everything is required in that unless it's specifically mentioned as optional. And then you'll submit the proposals through a form in Excelivance, which is linked on our website as well. Brief information about what the proposals include. So there is a brief description of how the researchers' experiences have prepared them to conduct the study. So this could include some things like educational background, working with a particular population, or just kind of general experience in a knowledge of a particular issue. We'll talk through the next elements a bit more deeply in the coming slides, but a title for the study, abstract, introduction. We'll ask you to outline some methods and procedures, uh, describe some kind of potential implications pending your results, provide a brief timeline and a budget. And if you're interested in reviewing any of this information from previous years, we do have some information on past winners and finalists available on our website as well. All right, so application elements, as I mentioned, we do need a title for this, as well as an abstract. So that's just a brief summary of the proposal's key points and features. We asked you to provide a brief timeline. So this would be kind of including the anticipated start dates and completion dates. So if you're going to conduct interviews from September to October, or you're going to analyze data from November to December, those sorts of things. One thing to note there is that the research must be completed to present the findings at the National Conference on Students in Transition in fall 2027. So it does kind of fall into about a 1-year timeline there. We ask you to identify your primary methodology. So this is just a quick identify whether it's quantitative, qualitative, mixed methods, or other. And you do have a space to also provide some kind of brief general or brief additional notes on what you're doing. So if you're doing quantitative work, you might want to identify that you're using regression analysis or something like that. Next is an introduction. So here you kind of introduce your study to the reviewers. So you want to talk about any kind of relevant issues, theories, or programs. So you could also include kind of rationale, discussion of relevant literature, relevant context, and connection to college student transitions. So generally just give a reviewer who might not be familiar with your topic or your area, give them some information to capture their interest as they read on further. Next, we ask you to identify research questions and the study design. So this is just sort of describing the general objectives, the purpose and goals of your research, and then identify any research questions. Here you'll also want to be sure to identify any kind of key design features. So you would want to talk about like your general methodology and kind of the unique aspects of your study and your design here that make it different from other studies that might be similar. In the methods, we also ask you to identify the sample and data collection. So if you're working with a particular sample of students, you would want to identify them and how you'll select and recruit them, um, as well as kind of other ways that you might access your sample through other existing data sets or something like that as well. We'll also ask you to describe kind of the instruments, measures, and protocols. So if you're going to be using a interview protocol, just you can kind of briefly describe that, or if you'll be applying a specific instrument with your population of students, just give some kind of background information on that. And then finally, for methods, we ask you to provide a brief kind of plan for your analysis. So how you're going to approach that analysis, including the methods and techniques and how this kind of approach aligns with the research questions and the overall kind of purpose of your study as well. We do ask you to provide a brief budget. So this is a detailed and itemized budget that totals $10,000. It doesn't need to be super detailed, but we do kind of want to give a general idea of where the money is going. So this could also include some things like travel to conferences, could include compensation for researchers' times, could pay for graduate student stipend or something like that. We do want to note that the grant does not cover any indirect costs. So the costs should be going directly to the research design there. There is also space to provide clear justification and relevant details. So we ask you to, especially in the cases where there's compensation involved. So if you were going to pay a graduate assistant, we'd want you to kind of provide how many hours you're going to be using that graduate assistant for, the rate of pay, and kind of the activities that they'll be doing as part of the grant. Or if it was something like a course buyout, just provide some kind of general information on the costs and that sort of thing. And then wrapping up, we ask you to identify the kind of potential implications. So these will kind of depend on your results, but identify the kind of potential impact that your findings could have on college student success. How might it form research on transitions and overall help institutions better serve students in transition? And then there is also space to provide references. So if you use any citations in your proposal, just provide the references there using APA 7. If you have any questions as you're working on your application or anything like that, feel free to contact us at the email that's listed on your screen, and we'll also be sure to put that in the chat as well. So for the requirements and selection criteria, we do have a couple different review processes. So our reviewers will evaluate proposals on the extent that the proposal focuses on college student transitions. Again, especially looking at those outside of the first year of college, as well as the extent that they clearly articulate a strong research design, whether they explore unique issues, subjects, participants, and unique sample, and then the potential for impacting transitions and student success nationally. A brief overview of our timeline here. As I said, applications are due by Monday, July 13th at 11:59 p.m. After that, we engage in a brief review of applications internally. So this is just making sure that kind of all the application pieces are there and that a completed application is being forwarded to our reviewers. Then it goes to our pool of reviewers. The first review will take about 3 weeks. And then after that, we do another round for a smaller, much smaller round for the finalists to identify the winner and any honorable mentions. The winner will be announced in uh, late September or early October, and then we will provide feedback from the reviewers and the comments that they leave on your proposal by the end of the fall semester of this year. Next, we'll just talk through a couple of kind of pointers and suggestions on how to write a strong proposal. So first off, quality writing is really important. So as much as you're able to in a PDF form, we encourage you to use things like paragraphs, line breaks, and headings. Um, Again, these might not all be possible, but even just simple line breaks can be really helpful in distinguishing paragraphs or sections. Um, Along with that line, using good grammar, punctuation, and language is really important. And then we also encourage you to really highlight the unique aspects of your study. So you'll see on the right side of the screen here that we do have some information on whether the proposals in the past have been which methodology they've followed. So you'll see that there is a good blend here, but that does offer you an opportunity to really highlight uh, the unique aspects. So if you're going to be focusing on a particular uh, student population, that would be really important to highlight, and that could be across any of those methodologies. Or if you're going to use a particular technique. So I think 2 years ago, the winner used testimonials, which is part of a qualitative research branch. So being sure to include those sort of things to really distinguish your proposal from others that might be similar. As we sort of talked about earlier, transitions can be really broad. So we really encourage you to make the case for your topic, your study. So whether that's the subject and population. So we encourage you to ground those in previous literature, theory, and social context. Um, because they're so broad, we also really encourage you to really connect to why this is a transition. That really helps our readers or our reviewers to get a good idea of what your study is looking at. We encourage you to start early. Strong proposals take time. We suggest that you integrate theory into research design. Um, in my time reviewing these and just kind of reading through them, I think the strongest ones that I've seen have a really clear connection to theory. So those can help kind of guide all sorts of different aspects of your studies from participant selection to the analysis that you'll use. So they can really ground your proposal in relevant context that way. We encourage you to balance depth and breadth. Uh, there are word limits on all the different aspects of the proposal. So you'll want to be sure to focus on giving the reviewers enough information, but you also want to cover a lot of different things in your proposal. So be sure to be attentive to that as well. And given our connection to between research and practice, we also really emphasize uh, or encourage you to emphasize practical applications. So how might your findings be put into practice depending on your results? All right, and I think we will turn it over now to Dr. Angie Miller.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Yeah, so um, the NRC folks asked me to come on here and give some advice. So hopefully my advice will be actually useful. A lot of the things that Kevin just mentioned was stuff that I would have said as well. Um, but yeah, so I will say that applying was actually a relatively easy process, but we did a lot of prep work for it. So when I heard about the grant and I was interested in applying, the first thing I did was I put together a team of people who I knew independently, but the three of us had never worked all together on research before. And I brought us together because some of us had more sort of content expertise, and then I had more of a sort of data and methodological expertise. So if you are working with more than one person, kind of think about like, well, how do all of us sort of bring something to the table? And we had an sort of ideas meeting, and that was where we decided on what the research question should be. And from there, we put together sort of an outline of, okay, this is our research question. These are the different components of the proposal. How are we going to sort of divide and conquer on the work on it? And what we ended up doing was writing a lot longer than we needed to. So all of the different components of the proposal, they've put a lot of word limits in, which is actually super helpful in writing the proposal, knowing sort of like that you're writing the correct amount for each section. We ended up writing what was longer than needed, and then we reduced it. And then we saved the long version for when we went on to submit to conference proposals and, prepping for manuscripts. We sort of had this longer version. So it was more work on the front end, but it actually ended up being super useful for us later on. And then also a sort of tip in thinking about the budget, we decided we wanted to keep it simple and realistic because we know how much conferences cost. We know sort of how much all of these things cost. So we didn't want to sort of over plan for what the money could be used for. We wanted to be realistic. And we felt like that would be like the best use of the money was to make sure we, were really specific with what we wanted, but not expecting it to cover every single thing imaginable related to research. So as you can see, they've put a slide up here. So the title of our project is Counting the Cost and Exploratory Analysis of Student Debt, Perceived College Value, and Financial Stability for Graduating Seniors. And this project uses data from the National Survey of Student Engagement, which I guess I should have introduced myself at the beginning. So I'm a research scientist at Indiana University Bloomington in the Center for Post-Secondary Research, which houses NSSE, the National Survey of Student Engagement. So I have worked on that data since 2009. And we have both the core NSSE survey and then we have topical modules. And we have a topical module called First Year Experiences and Senior Transitions. So the sort of senior transitions piece felt perfect for this particular grant. In the call, it even has the word transitions in the name. So this module was recently updated and we had brand new data in 2025. And one of the things that we asked about was student loan debt. That's something we had never asked about on NSSE before. And even though there's a lot of data related to student loan debt, sort of federal data, looking at that, the aspect that made it unique was that it was on NSSE. So it was connected to a lot of other student engagement data. And it was, we had a lot more demographic characteristics. And we also had some items about sort of perceptions of value. So given what both Kevin and Jarrett kind of emphasized, like what is it that makes your project unique? So the thing that made our project unique was that it was this new question about student loan debt on a project that had previously never asked about that before. So we had a lot of new data to explore. And then we also did want to explore different subgroups. And that was, an important aspect of the research question too, was like, well, we do really want to focus on some specific subgroups and see how they differ, and looking at them sort of intersectionally, how they differ in conjunction with all of the other subgroups. So for example, we've done some research looking at first generation student differences, community college transfers, some students by majors. What does debt and perceived value look like by major? And then also there's some interesting emerging information about students who reported they don't know the amount of loan debt that they have. They know they have some, but they don't know the amount. So we're super excited to be exploring sort of all of these things. Um, and having the grant is really helping us to sort of keep a focus. So we're having usually monthly team meetings. And that gives us some deadlines too. So we know that we have we're presenting in the fall at the conference that is, sponsored by NRC. And then also we will be submitting a manuscript to the Journal of First Year Experiences and Students in Transition, which I, in my head, call JFest. I don't know if that's the acronym that everyone else uses, but when I look at it, my eyes say JFest. So we have that in progress as well. So it's given us all of these sort of timelines. We've also met with the new editor for that journal to see like sort of is our research question sort of in keeping with the vision that he has as the new editor for the journal. We've also presented at AERA and the Council for the Study of Community Colleges. We presented on those this spring. We've submitted conference proposals to ASH and Midwera, which is the Midwestern AERA. And then we also have recently submitted a manuscript to Journal of Higher Education. And we've got several more conferences and manuscripts planned. So we have a big spreadsheet where we have research questions, like sort of subcomponents of the study listed, and then potential conferences and potential journals that we might be submitting those to. And, if there's a conference, then we know the deadlines for those sort of things too. So it has really helped us to sort of have like an organized approach to being a research team and thinking about dividing up the work, and then also sort of what are the different outlets, what do we think is going to align the best with all of these different sort of sub research questions that we've generated based on what we submitted for the grant. So I think I'm looking at my little list. I think that's all of the things I had. And also I'll say, not just because they're all on the call, but because it's true, the NRC folks have been really great and really supportive. They've done a lot of promotional things, but also in terms of just answering any questions we might have, and the back and forth of sort of the logistics of it has been a very pleasant experience from that perspective as well. So I think that's everything I wanted to mention, but I'm happy to answer other questions. I was not keeping up with the chat as I was saying stuff, so we'll return to the Q&A portion, I think.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Miller. And you're right, you were not contractually obligated to say any of those things, but it's good to hear that you've had a positive and supportive experience, and we very much have enjoyed learning about the results of the work that you and your colleagues have been pursuing. So I believe that leads us into opportunity for discussion and to address questions that y'all may have. I'll just turn attention quickly to my colleague Sean. I think you've been monitoring the chat, and do you want to help us facilitate what to address first?
Yeah. So we have some great questions that come in through the chat. So I'm going to start at the top and work my way down. So the first question is, does the NRC have a way to determine if a new application appears similar to past submissions from other applicants so that the new applicant reconsiders innovation to their version of the proposal or restructures it completely? So for example, do we have a list of topics that were already used and what year they were submitted?
It's a good question. I think the information that we have that's available publicly would be past recipients and honorable mentions, at least from the past year. And I think that that gives a good indication of some of the key topics of interest that were received well, through our process. And then I think also too, it's for authors or people working on these proposals to do due diligence and to tell us what is unique or different, not just relative to what we know about historical application data or something like that. And so being able to make a convincing argument based on the author's command, of the literature or of theory or methods, being able to make a persuasive case relative to that person's knowledge of the field, and of their expertise is as well. I think those would be helpful ways to try to make sure there's an innovative component to be explicit about.
All right, our next question is on the application. So the application states that there is only one application for one principal investigator. If the research has two principal investigators, does another principal investigator need to submit a duplicate application to provide their information?
Kevin, do you want to respond?
I think on this one, I would say uh, submit just one application. I think in the form it asks you to identify the one principal investigator, as you said. I think go ahead and just add any others as a additional researcher. But you can note that the PI role is being uh, split or shared within the brief description of the researcher's experience.
Yeah,
So you can
we
say,
used co-PI as the language in ours. So I was the one who was like listed first and technically the PI, but then the others we referred to as the co-PIs, if that's helpful.
I would say uh, list the person that you want to like receive the emails as the PI in the submission form. So we'll kind of think of that as like the corresponding PI.
The next question we have is, can we integrate observed experiences as it relates to the student population?
So it sounds like that the author or team they would want to be able to to give like an anecdotal example of maybe something they're noticing in the field. And if that's the case, if I'm hearing that question correctly, it's fair game to be able to maybe lead or even open a proposal with an anecdotal account. But I also think to be able to succeed in the double blind review process, there would want to be attention to data and research and what that also says or sheds light on a given issue. And then, of course, being able to leverage the knowledge or understanding of the literature to show where there is indeed a definite gap that then needs to be addressed, through the proposed research. So that's my interpretation of the question. I hope that that's on point and helpful to who had asked it.
All right, the next question is if you have any concerns related to the use of AI when it comes to completing the application.
The proposal should be written by humans. And all just to be blunt and direct. And so I think for this process to be able to carry with it integrity and to live up to the standards that we have in our field, for rigorous and authentic scholarship, that it should be written by people. And perhaps I'm not trying to open the door and have it both ways. I could understand how if you're developing a budget, for example, AI could help you figure out calculations for how much you might pay out, per a member of your team or a graduate student for X number of hours at such and such rate. But otherwise, it would be our expectation that it's written by people, and that's also something that would have a discerning eye, through the review process.
Right, our next question is about the budget for the grant. So the budget's line on the application states that compensation for researchers' time. Does that mean writing time? For example, this individual TAs every semester and they would like time to solely focus on the writing. So I guess to summarize, can someone use the money to pay themselves for writing time?
Kevin, do you want to chime in on the budget?
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think it can. I think it's up to you to be sure that you explain how that will be used to the reviewers within your budget kind of justification. So you want to like set aside the number of hours, the like pay rate that you would be using for that, um, just to make sure that it's kind of using the funds for the purpose of furthering the research.
All right, next question. Are there any topics that should be avoided when it comes to what's on the application?
Truthfully, I don't think of the application or the grant program in terms of what should not be studied. I think that perhaps what makes it exciting and a good creative opportunity is for you all to shape the way that we think about and define student transitions. And so I wouldn't think of a particular type of student transition that shouldn't be done. Again, as we've talked about throughout our time together today, there's an emphasis on work that would explore transition beyond the first year experience. But otherwise, it's open-ended to allow you all to shape the direction that you would want the field to head in.
All right, the next question is, can this grant fund in-progress work as long as it's currently unfunded, or is the intent to fund a project start to finish?
That's a really good question. I think for work that is already underway or in some stage of development, it would be helpful in the proposal to understand what has already been done to date and how will the grant enable you to do something that takes it in a different direction or that expands or deepens the work. And so I know that I've done that before with grant proposals as well, where maybe it's the continuation of work that has been previously funded is very important then to be able to distinguish where are you to date. That could work to your competitive advantage because it shows that the work is likely to be completed if received funding. And then to be able to articulate the ways in which the grant is going to help you achieve these other goals that you have, again, for expansion or more depth or nuance or a different form of data collection, something along those lines. So I wouldn't want to dissuade you from considering this, but again, I think it's important just to be clear about where are you with the work, and then what is going to be new or different through the grant.
Next question, do investigators need to obtain IRB approval from their institution before submitting the proposal?
Um, I I feel like in the past we've had them like that's usually the first kind of step within the timeline. I think it's very common for that to be included as part of the grant activities. So it doesn't need to be completed prior to submission.
Next question, should the topic be only US focused, or can it be more broad, like a more international topic?
I think again, it's up to the authors or the team or investigator to decide how they want to frame and cast their work, especially in terms of the aim and scope, and then to be able to just justify why would it be important to look at this topic internationally or to focus on a topic that maybe is more international and less US centric. And so I think it would be interesting to read a proposal in that kind of area or niche. But I think again, it comes down in my mind to justification. Why is it important to look at it in this way, especially in light of the research questions you might be addressing? And so I'm not trying not to kind of ramble about it, but think about the different components, right, of a proposal. You have research questions, you have the methods you're going to use to address, and you're going to have your aim and scope of whether it's US based or international. Think about how those things align together, and again, the justification you have for why it is important to approach this topic in the way that you would want.
All right, we have two more questions in the chat. Another one on the budget. Does the budget have to show the money used all in one year, or could the money be used to pay students for multiple years?
I would say that generally the purpose of this grant is to present the research at next year's Students in Transition Conference. So um, I would think that most of that would happen within kind of the 2026, 2027 timeline. Um, but the money could also be used for like presentation at other conferences. So I think it could be multiple years, but um, I would think most of it would happen within the 1 year timeline.
And let's see, last question. We may have some others that just came through, but last question I see on here, how does the NRC use the historical winning proposals outcomes data in industry or in practice, or are they just archived?
That's a really interesting question. I think for us, in terms of research findings from past recipients, first and foremost, they're shared at the Students in Transition conference for attendees who are practitioners. And so it's a direct connection to people who could potentially apply, utilize, or tailor what it is you're recommending, to their particular situations or the students that they work with. And it's a large audience that is going to attend. And there's, again, a lot of publicity that's going to surround the presentation for the grant recipient. There's other audiences overlapping in a way, audiences that we have too, in terms of like our first year experience conference, also largely comprised of practitioners and some scholars as well. And so there's great opportunity for reach. And again, presenting at the first year experience conference is not included per se in this awards package, but nevertheless, there's other ways through the NRC that we might be able to work with you all to share the work that you're doing. And there's other things that we do at the NRC that leverages our research expertise, not just our in-house expertise, but those of folks in the field to be able to inform professional development opportunities and trainings and online courses and things of that nature that we also run and coordinate throughout the year. And so we take very seriously this connection between research to practice, and we have a lot of infrastructure and capacity and resources in our center to be able to make sure that that connection actually happens. And again, to be supportive of the recipient of the grant, to share that work widely and with people who could actually put it into good use.
So two more questions have come through in the chat. Are applicants allowed to submit each year, or is there a wait time if you were recently awarded by the NRC?
I think that's a good question. I think that we'd be open to another application from someone who may have been a past recipient, but I think it'd be important to be able to highlight what's new or different about the work that you're doing. Not that someone would resubmit the same thing, obviously, but just to be clear about the intention and the work and to go on and compete. So to me, that person wouldn't be automatically excluded or eliminated. I think, again, really like any applicant, the onus is on being able to frame and justify this project to differentiate it in a way that suggests it's new, different, or novel, and to do it in a convincing and persuasive way. Easier said than done, I guess. But that, I guess, would be the perspective that we would take.
And a final question, if the proposal is selected, does the research need to wait after being presented at the fall 2027 SIT conference for the first time before being presented on this individual's own campus or at other conferences?
That's a good question. So the public introduction of the winner, it's going to take place this fall at the Students in Transition conference. And then after that, it's fair game for the researchers to be able to present at other conferences. And I feel like Dr. Miller, if it's okay to reference you and your team, y'all have done that already leading into this year's conference 1 year later, where you're going to present findings from your work. And so it sounds like y'all were very thoughtful and strategic in how you might develop things and present along the way, and probably getting good feedback as well as you keep moving forward.
Yeah, and we sort of always conceptualize like conference this fall and then what we wanted to submit for publication at JFest as sort of like the end, like the final product, the big product. But then, along the way, we had sort of other like mini projects, things that were, shoot offs of ideas we had had, or okay, let's just focus on this subpopulation. Let's just focus on this subpopulation. So yeah, officially we've like presented the project, different components of the project up and before now, and then we've got some stuff that's currently under review. But yeah, we were sort of thinking as like the final step would be the research that we present for the conference and submit to the journal, and we wanted to make sure that that's whatever we end up submitting and presenting was still really closely aligned with what we said we were going to do in the proposal, if that makes sense. But yeah, we come up with sort of different sub projects along the way, and that's what we've been presenting on and getting some really good feedback and responses as well. And sometimes it gives you another idea. Oh, we should look at this too. So it's kind of an iterative project, but still making sure that the final presentation is going to be aligned with the grant, or with the what we said we were going to do for the grant.
I think that's well said. And I think also too, for who asked the question, it's fair game to account for this in your timeline and in your plans. You could be clear about when you might present on which pieces of the work and to which audiences. And I think that also could speak to not just the dissemination of this grant funded work, but also impact for who you might be engaging with, through what it is that you're finding.
Well, thank you all for the great questions. I know throughout the Q&A, we've kind of referenced the National Conference on Students in Transition. So I'm going to drop a link in the chat in case you're interested in joining us for this conference this fall. We're also still accepting proposal submissions. So if you would like to present research you're working on, we'd love to have that. Conference registration just opened yesterday, so that's going to be open through September 11th, but the proposals are due pretty soon on July 16th, so we're almost to that 1 month to go mark. But we'd love to have you join us. It's a virtual conference, so easy to attend from the comfort of your home or office. And the price point is relatively low as well. We're keeping it reduced again this year because we want to be able to help out as best as we can with your ongoing professional development needs. All right. Well, just so y'all know, we have been recording today's session. So tomorrow morning, you will receive an email from the NRC with a copy of the recording in case you need to go back, revisit anything, listen to the Q&A again. But we just want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule this summer to join us. I know the start of summer can be a very busy time, but we appreciate you joining us to learn more about this grant. And we hope to see your application come through soon. Just a reminder, that's due July 13th, so that will be here in just a few weeks. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us at the email address that we dropped in the chat earlier. We'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. So thank you all, and we hope to hear from you again soon.
All right. Thank you all, and good luck.